In this video, I'll be reviewing Momofuku by David Chang. Momofuku is a new empire created by David Chang, a James Beard Award-winning chef and Netflix special personnel, plus a big bad boy chef. I've been following David since watching his Netflix special Ugly Delicious and got his cookbook after reading up more about his story. Published in 2009, 5 years after opening up his first restaurant Noodle Bar. This was before he really took off as a TV personality, so it's interesting to read this book because I only knew him as big in life and big in size, hotshot TV cook. But this book is before really all of that. Since from over 11 years ago, I think it's more about food and being a chef than if he wrote this book today in 2020. To categorize this book is hard because it's a blend of Korean, Japanese, Chinese, and American cuisine, which I think is a reflection of David's experience in learning how to cook. It's kind of the Asian American experience distilled into a cookbook. For the simplicity, the problem with this book is there's way too many recipes that call the recipes. One recipe will call for ginger scallion sauce, another will call for slow poached eggs. There's too much flipping back and forth to make a recipe. Also, recipes can be extremely long, taking up multiple pages with insane amounts of wordy steps. You really have to dig into the recipe and calculate execution before cooking anything. He has a recipe that requires meat glue, which he goes over in one of his write-ups, but I don't want to buy meat glue just for some brick chicken. I'm not even going to think about cooking the pig's head torchon, which requires half a pig's head. It's 4 pages long and would basically take a whole freeze-dried to cook. At least for the pork buns, he's honest, just tells you to buy the frozen steamed buns at the grocery store. But he is nice enough to give a recipe for those passionate home chefs out there. And you can just make these and freeze them, so that's a plus. This book feels less like for home cooking and more with that thought process of David Chang and his Momofuku restaurants. In an interview with Munchies for Vice, Peter Meehan, the co-author of this book, talks to David Chang and says, "You were less interested in doing a book of recipes than in kind of getting the story down of the wild and early years of Momofuku. I really think it's reflected in this book, since recipes can be difficult and it's more of about his story and not really how to cook at home. So yeah, I really think this book is just meant for his thinking process and not really, trying to cook this at home. Especially once you reach the Coast section of this book, it definitely becomes a steep hill of difficulty to climb. It makes sense, since Co is a Michelin star winning restaurant, so recipes are more experimental and more quote-unquote refined. One recipe that stuck out to me was the shaved foie gras, which is a recipe comprised of 3 other recipes. This to me is a recipe you would have to be fiercely passionate about to try, and then after trying to cook once, you never try it again. I really like how this book is not afraid to give some away Momofuku's signature recipes. I think they know how people would rather come into their restaurant and eat these recipes instead of trying to cook them. It's a great marketing strategy. Buy the book to eat at their restaurants. I think the best and most approachable recipes come from the noodle bar section of the book, which is the first third of the book. There are good recipes for pickles, staple Korean food, bacon dashi potatoes and clams, and fried chicken. I really love the roasted sweet summer corn with miso butter. I'm definitely going to use the miso butter for other dishes I make. The story of this book was the best part for me. It goes over how David went from not knowing what to want to do, bumbling around Japan, to creating Momofuku. He goes over his screw-ups and how he felt like everything was about to come crashing down. I think David needs to be more optimistic in life, really. He was so pessimistic about everything. Come on, bub, cheer up. His layout follows his opening of the restaurant, so you can start from the beginning at Noodle Bar, continue on to Sambar, and reach all the way to Ko. Each of these sections started with a write-up of how he came up with the ideas, troubles, and successes he found with each restaurant. It's really interesting to get an insight for each restaurant because, a lot of restaurants fail, and it seemed like he was going to fail, but he kind of came through, and so that was really cool to kind of see his struggle and see that, chefs aren't like these magical, all-powerful beings. They're human. There are also sections about where he sources ingredients, like the foie gras and country ham, which is cool to see him deep dive into everything. I can see why he became popular for digging into the sources of food, and why he is cast for Netflix Ugly Delicious. The problem with this book is it's too complicated or either too wordy or just kind of all over the place. But it's got really interesting ideas. I don't think all the recipes are great, but there are some pretty standout ones, again like the miso butter. So overall, this is a good cookbook. I would recommend reading through it, but it's not one of my top cookbooks out there. So overall, I'm giving this a 6 out of 10.